Cumberland Island is an island that is part of the national seashore. It's part of our national parks, and it's an island off the coast of Georgia. If you, in order to go there, you drive to St. Mary's, Georgia, and you have to have reservations to visit the island. And you get on a ferry, a little boat they call the Cumberland Queen. They take you 45 minutes through the intercoastal waterway and across some of these salt marshes, and they deposit you on this island. Now, if you take the early ferry, you can stay all day and then leave the island on the late ferry, or as my friends and I did, you can take the early ferry, get off the island, and stay several days. And as long as you're back on, Thursday or Friday, by the time the last ferry leaves, you can leave the island. My two friends from high school and I went there as an escape. They wanted to do some backpacking, and they wanted to do some camping. And both these guys never hunted or really fished like we did. And I'm not sure that they were wilderness equipped, but they did some research, and we decided we would go backpack several days on this island. We took our own food, we took our own fuel, we took water purification tablets. And I was kind of the guy in charge of carrying the extra fuel, because Greg carried the photography equipment, and I don't remember what the other allotment was for Bobby. But we went to this island, and part of going to Cumberland Island was number one, the adventure of backpacking and staying on this island, and the other was avoidance. It was escapism for me. You see, when my two best friends from high school started talking about, hey, we need to do something as a graduation thing, we need to do a senior trip, I was unwilling to go to Panama City Beach. I had heard too many stories from my classmates. I'd heard too many guys talk in the locker rooms. And I was trying to be true to my faith. I was trying to be, a person of ethics and morals. And I just didn't feel like I needed to go to the beach scene with a bunch of revelry, young adults celebrating the fact they graduated from high school is probably not the place I needed to be. Now, as a teenager, I wasn't a perfect kid. I was, like any other kid, I did my fair share of things that I'm not proud of, but there were some things I tried to avoid. Now, I wasn't a drinker. I've never had, a drink of alcohol, anything stronger than Granny Wallace's cough medicine. And I didn't smoke. I've never done any pills. I've never done any weed. My two temptations as a teenager was I liked to fight. And I say that, and you got to understand, I've never been in a barroom brawl. I've been in some altercations with some, because two boys with fragile egos, or two boys with short tempers, or just boys that like to kind of be rowdy. So you don't get the idea. I'm throwing people through windows and busting chairs over their heads, and never been in a fight where I went to the hospital, and really only ever sent one other guy to the hospital, but not what you consider a real fighter, just rowdiness, just stupid kid stuff. But I didn't feel like being on Panama City Beach with guys there who were drinking and away from home would be a place I could go and avoid fights. And the other thing I wanted to avoid was girls. Not that I had anything against girls. I was obsessed with females as an adolescent boy, but I didn't really think I needed to be on the beach with beach attire and girls surrounding me. And I just felt like, hey, because of some of my religious upbringing and some of my thoughts on modesty and trying to be a person who avoided lustful thinking, I just didn't think I needed to be in that environment. So as a concession, my two best friends and I decided that we would go to the beach without the beach scene. We would be on a deserted beach, because once you get to Cumberland Island and you're camping, at a certain time, everybody goes home. And so there's just relatively a handful of people, and the chances of you being on the beach with anybody else and having any trouble, you can just play in the surf and explore and do all the things you want to do. Well, we hiked in the first day to a place called Stafford Beach. And I don't remember, it's not very far, maybe less than 5 miles probably. And so we set up our camp, and just on the other side of the live oaks and on the other side of the dunes was the Atlantic Ocean. And so for whatever reason, on one of the days that we were camping there, I decided to go out on an excursion by myself. The two guys I was camping with, they weren't really exercise guys. They didn't run. They didn't work out. They were just my friends. And The things that we shared in common. We did climb a little bit together. We did some light rappelling and some real easy top roping, but I was the fitness guy. And so I go out on this beach to, go for a walk or go for a run or whatever, and nobody's there. For all practical purposes, I've got a 7 mile stretch of beach that I shouldn't run into anybody. If I run into anybody, the probabilities are pretty low. And I'm out here, doing my thing on the beach, and way off in the distance, I see an object, and you can tell it doesn't fit the beach topography. So I get a little closer and get a little closer, and I think to myself, well, you 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 found a mermaid. And as I get closer, sure enough, it became more mermaid-like. Well, it turns out that she wasn't a mermaid. She had two very, very functioning, very beautiful legs. In fact, this was this blonde-haired, bronzed beauty sitting on a towel in the middle of a deserted beach. Now, the way temptation works is you have internal hazards, and your internal hazards are the things that you think about and the things that you want, the things that you desire, the things that you obsess over. And external hazards is when the things that you want manifest in your life, and you have this intersection between the internal hazards and the external hazards. And when you have an intersection between internal hazards and external hazards, that's when caution shows up. Because if you don't make good choices in that situation, if you don't make good choices on the intersection between internal hazards and external hazards, you're going to do something dumb, foolish, stupid, or wrong. And here I am on a deserted beach in an attempt to avoid girls in bikinis, and there's a girl in a bikini on this beach. Turns out she is the niece of the head ranger. Now, if you need any more caution than that'll reset your thinking. I'm talking to this girl on this beach, and her uncle is the head ranger. He runs this island. He knows the places to feed a guy to the sharks, feed a guy to the turtles, feed a guy to the alligators, or bury you in the sand, and no one will ever even look for your body. So I made a very wise decision, greeted the young lady very briefly, and went back to my camp because I did not want to be the victim of the serial killer ranger who's protecting his niece. Now, I've been back to Cumberland Island several times, and I've been there every time as an escape, but I've been there with my wife. Jackie and I had gone by ourselves. We took some friends one time. We camped there with Derek and Lisa Horst. We took Lonnie Beth there on a trip. We were able to take my dad, my brother, and Lonnie Beth one time. And it's a beautiful place to go. And head ranger's daughters aside, it's a safe place to go, and it's a good place to escape. Well, we were there one time, and we were there at the time of year where the sea turtles were hatching. And you walk around the beach, and there's these little stakes in the ground, and they have numbers on them, and it lets you basically know how many days they've been in the ground. And if you can time it right, you can sit on the beach with a red flashlight and watch the little turtles emerge. In fact, we saw several of the parent turtles, the large green sea turtles or the loggerhead turtles, out in the surf and on the beach. And we even found the body of one about the size of a coffee table. This is a huge turtle, and I think it had been attacked or hurt by a shark, or either been hit by a boat. The rangers had taken the head from the turtle and were doing an autopsy on it. And so it was just this big, huge carapace, the big shell of the turtle, and the flippers lying out on the beach. And I mean, the thing would have been, 4.5, 5 feet. To me, it looked like a small coffee table, and it would have weighed several hundred pounds. Well, we're exploring the beach now. We've seen this sea turtle, and so we are looking at other stuff. And the most surprising thing that we saw was a dolphin. And not in the water. Now they're all over the water out there, but this one was lying on the beach. It was fully intact. There was a wound on it. There wasn't a mark on it. Nothing had injured it. It hadn't been hit by a boat. It hadn't been attacked by a shark. But this beautiful sea mammal was lying on the beach, and it was dead. The ranger explained to us that, well, these are sea mammals. They live in the water, but they have to breathe air. And if they get too tired of swimming and they stop swimming, they sink. Well, a dolphin can't breathe underwater like a regular fish does, because a dolphin doesn't have fins; it has lungs, and so they have to porpoise. They have to come up and breathe and go back down, and come up and breathe and go back down. And he says, for whatever reason, sometimes they get so tired, they get old, they get injured, they get sick, and it's literally sink or swim. And so in order to maintain breathing without having to swim, they beach themselves. They run aground and they rest. They may lay on a coral projection, or they may lay on a beach. But every now and then one of them gets out of the water and it can't get back in. Dolphins don't read tide schedules. They don't understand about high tide and low tide. And sometimes they run out on the beach and they're lying there exhausted and they need to swim and breathe. But sometimes they have to choose between swimming or breathing. And so they abandon swimming to lie on the beach and breathe, and then the tide goes out and they can't get back in the water. And I think it's a maneuver like this that cost this dolphin its life. It died because it stopped swimming. You see, it's not designed to live completely on land. It not only can't thrive on land, it long-term can't survive on land. And so this dolphin, because of its disease or its exhaustion or whatever, had put itself on the beach and it never returned to the water. And it died there in an attempt to escape or avoid something that was stressing it. The stress of swimming and breathing. I have been tired enough to want to just get out of my element, just so I could breathe. One of the quotes from the Eagles is, sometimes there's a part of me that wants to turn from here and go, running like a child from these warm stars down the 7 Bridges Road. There are demands on everybody's lives, and my life is no more demanding than anybody else's, but I interface with lots of people. And the stress builds up, and it's not acute stress that destroys us, it's chronic stress. You see, the most weight I've ever lifted in my life was 315 pounds. I was doing an explosive strength test, and I bench pressed 315 pounds. Now, it wasn't free weights, but neither was it a cabled machine. This was a machine that had a bar shaped like the letter Y with handles, and then on the back side of the bar was a vertical pole that went down through these metal plates, and each plate had a designated weight, and you put a pin in it, and we were moving the whole stack. I think it topped out at 315 pounds. So I wasn't really having to balance the weights, but neither was I getting assistance from cables. So it probably won't count as an actual lift. But in my world, I was on this machine. We're doing an explosive strength test, and the score I scored was I moved 315 pounds. And probably when called upon to do something massive like that, we've all, had to move, fallen trees or push a car or help pull something. And all of us are capable for short, extended periods of time handling a lot of weight. That's acute stress. What happens is chronic stress. The stress of breathing and swimming and breathing. You want to see how strong you are? You want to talk about weights? Take a 12-ounce bottle of water and hold it in your hand, or put it in the palm of your hand, and then hold your hand straight out. Hold your arm parallel to the ground, lock your elbow, lock your shoulder, lock your wrist, and see how long you can hold 12 ounces out. You see, within a minute, that water bottle becomes your world. In 2 minutes, your rotator cuff becomes your world. And after 2 minutes, anything that you put on the end of that lever will cause catastrophic system failure. It's chronic stress, not acute stress, that burns people out. And oftentimes when we're thinking about chronic stress, swimming and breathing, we just decide to give one up for the other. And it oftentimes leads to our demise. Now, there's nothing wrong with desiring a rest. There's nothing wrong with needing a rest. There's really nothing wrong with even taking a rest. But it's the type of rest that we take and what we take a rest from that can hold the hidden dangers for us, the things that we can't see, that the tide may run out and leave us where we are. We run ourselves aground, and then we can't get back into our element that we need to survive in. And even though it's a stressful element, we still need to be in it to survive. You see, a dolphin has to have water and air to live, and to give up one in pursuit of the other it is the danger of burnout. It's the danger of depression, and it's really a sign of desperation. We encounter situations and are forced or seem to force ourselves to choose between things that we vitally need for our survival. And sometimes we give something up, or we abandon something, or we run ourselves aground, and we call it adapting. And we run ourselves aground because we're running away from being uncomfortable. We're running away from being overwhelmed. We're running away from being exhausted. And then there's really a better way to balance that. Learning, hey, what do I really control? And only taking responsibility for the things that I control. That helps us balance the things that overwhelm us or stress us or burn us out. I find it interesting in the scripture that there's a command in the Hebrew, the Shema. Listen, hear, O Israel. We're commanded to love God with our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And so to fully engage with God, the full engagement, we must address and nurture heart, soul, strength, and mind. We have these facets of our beings that if we can't invest all of them in, then it's suboptimal. We may be surviving, but we're not thriving. You see, we are emotional, spiritual, physical, and intellectual. And there has to be balance between those four elements. None of them can be ignored. And if I'm doing anything that overwhelms my ability to engage emotionally, spiritually, physically, or intellectually, then that's probably a sign of burnout. It's probably a sign that I'm suffering from either chronic or acute stress. And if we take any of those elements, if we take any of those facets and we ignore them, then we, in a sense, are stuck. We strand ourselves because we've disengaged from either the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, or the intellectual. Now, you can probably get through professionally with one or more of those things turned off. You can go to a job and perform like an automaton. You can just go through the motions. You can just get by. You can survive but not thrive. But I'm not really talking about professional burnout. I'm talking about letting your career burn you out to the point that then you become burned out in your interpersonal relationships. Because see, if you don't use all four of those elements, you don't use all four of those facets, you don't have all four of those important ingredients in connecting to your spouse, your children, your parents, your adult friends, your church, your community. You've got to invest in those areas. You've got to have an emotional investment, a spiritual investment, a physical investment, and an intellectual investment. You've got to invest energy and effort in all four of those, or you will burn out that relationship, or you'll strand yourself somewhere and won't have access to one of the others. Fred Jones, in his book, Positive Classroom Discipline, has a chapter on burnout, and I'd like to modify his quote. The main myth about burnout is that it happens after 6 to 10 years of doing whatever. And in fact, it happens every day. Feeling that you want to quit, and this is where I modify Fred's quote, feeling that you want to quit, and by quit, I'm saying withdraw or disengage from one of the four dimensions of investment: emotional, spiritual, intellectual, or physical. If you want to quit and you disengage, you withdraw from one of those, Feeling like you don't want to do this anymore is simply the end of the line. You see, that decision is the terminal point. It's like dying of cancer after you've had it for 6 years. The cancer has been present for years and it's been consuming you day by day. Deciding that you, quote unquote, don't want to do this, whatever this is, I'm not going to be involved emotionally anymore. I'm not going to be involved spiritually anymore. I'm not going to be involved physically anymore. I'm not going to be involved intellectually anymore. Making that decision is not burnout. That's the final, unavoidable terminal event of burnout. So, see, you don't burn out lying on the beach. You burn out when you make the decision to go to the beach and disengage from either breathing or swimming. See, if you feel exhausted and drained at the end of every day, and then you're dying professionally, personally, or interpersonally, and you're doing it by inches. When I disengage, when I decide, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore, and I beach myself, I run aground, and I'm avoiding emotional engagement, I'm avoiding spiritual engagement, I'm avoiding physical engagement, or I'm avoiding intellectual engagement. If I decide to take a break from one of those, I don't need to let that break be very long, because if you take a break from any one of those things very long, your relationships, your health, your connection to other people, your connection to thriving, not just surviving, but thriving. If you take a break from any one of those things very long, the tide will go out and you won't last very long.